All right, this is part 2 of our lesson on, there's the bell, let's wait for that. All right, part 2 of our lesson on 3D SkyBox. So let's kind of quickly review what we've done so far so we can kind of get caught up and then proceed from there. So what do we have? We've got a player start, we've got some ground right here, and I'm using, I don't know, however big it is. It's 5,000 something. Doesn't really matter. The size really isn't that super important for this lesson. The other thing is I built out all these pieces of ground around me. So if you look at this in this top-down view, you'll see that there's these side pieces that kind of form a ring around the center of the world. Now this is going to be the actual playable part of the level. All the rest of this is going to be the virtual 3D skybox around the player. In the center of this map, at the very origin point of the entire level, which is represented by this blue, green, and red line right here, this is the center of the entire game universe, I have this entity right here, my sky camera. And this sky camera is directly centered in the middle of these greenish, bluish, whatever turquoise lines. That sky camera is dead center in the world. It has to be, okay? So my sky camera is directly in the center of the world. And you can tell because all these lines go right through the center of each of the sides, all right? Now, this next step is where we're actually going to create the 3D skybox itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the menu and we're going to turn on our texture locks. So this TL here and this TL here. What this is going to do is when we scale these boxes, it's going to keep the scale ratio of the texture. So if I reduce it by 50%, the texture on that block is going to reduce by 50%. So think of it this way. This my bricks here that I'm using as the ground. When we miniaturize the stuff on the outside, it's going to go to 1/16 normal size. So I need these bricks to shrink to 1/16 their normal size, because when they get projected by the camera, they're going to grow back to their normal size. So I have to shrink them so that when they regrow, they don't go 16 times their normal size. And then you'll have giant bricks, okay? So step 1 for today is to go up here and click both of these texture lock buttons for me. All right? Now, I'm going to fly up in the sky. We are going to start by selecting the sky camera. Okay, so take your selection tool here. Okay, take your selection tool, click on the sky camera. Then you're going to hold your control button and you're going to click on all the pieces of ground that are around the center. But do not click the center. Okay, so it should look like this. So I have the center camera here, my sky camera. I selected that, so it's red. And then I hold down my control button and I selected all of these ground pieces except the center piece. All right? We're going to go to Tools, Transform. We're going to get our transformation menu. We're going to go to Scale. And then for X, Y, and Z, we're going to reduce it to 0.0625. So this is simply 1/16 expressed as a decimal rather than a fraction. Okay, so 0.0625. We're going to click OK. And now all this stuff is shrunk right here in the middle. Now before you click anything, let's just group it together so that we can move it without separating it, because it is vital that this camera stays right where it's at in relation to this ground right here, okay? So I'm going to click Tools, Group. Now let's grab this guy, and we're going to just move it away. Okay. So there it is right there. You can see the brick texture got really tiny. SkyBox is, or Sky Camera is right there in the center. And there's my game world. Now we're going to go ahead and put a box around this for the sky. So I'm going to take my block tool. I'm going to set this to SkyBox. Go all the way to the bottom. I'm going to take my block tool. I'm going to draw a box around this. Give it some height. Press enter. I'm going to take my selection tool. I want to make this box hollow. So I'm going to right click on it, make hollow, and I like to use -8. Click OK. And then go ahead and fly it to the inside and check it out. It should look like this. Alright. Now let's go back to our main map. And we're pretty much going to do the same thing. Except I'm going to be a little bit more precise with the box that I'm going to put around it. So I'm going to take my block tool. I'm going to make a box. And we're going to go ahead and line this box right up with the edge of the ground. Right there. And I'll do this one. Line it up. Looks good. It's lined up. Same thing, I'm going to give it some height. A little bit below is fine. I'm going to press enter. There's my skybox. Now I want to go ahead and make this guy hollow. And let's do -8. And there we go. Okay. Looks good. Looks good. All right, everything looks good. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So I'm going to press F9, let it run. It should load fairly quickly. I've already got it running, so. All right. So here's what you should see. It should look pretty massive, the world. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick a direction and just start running straight. Just keep running. Now you can see the kind of the tiling of the ground. That's okay. It's a lot of the same texture. But I stopped, okay? Right here. I stopped. I can't go any further. If I look down at the ground, I can almost make out a seam right there. I could play around with these textures. If I lined up this texture right here, this would be absolutely 100% invisible. You would not be able to tell that to my right is the world and to the left is the 3D skybox. Okay, so all that extra space out there is the 3D skybox. It's all massive amount of space. So it makes my level look incredibly large, but it's not. This is all 3D skybox out here. It's just miniature, but you can see it scaled the texture back up. And so you really, from a couple steps back, you cannot really tell. As you get a little closer, you can see the seam. But like I said, if we took some time and lined up this texture, we could absolutely make this completely invisible. But most of the time, you're not going to get right up to the edge anyway. All right, let's go back into the editor. Okay, so let's go into our 3D SkyBox, the little box, wherever that's at. There it is. Okay, so now here's the trick. You cannot put anything inside this center box right here. This is where your level gets inserted into this thing. But if we look at the size of the player, if I drop a player in here, it kind of gives you just an idea of the scale that we're operating with. So if I put a player right here, I mean, this is a tiny little level that he's in. But the way the projection system works is that, you know, this gets multiplied by 16 and expanded out around the map. So it just makes the map look so much larger than it actually is. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a building in here. All right. So let's go to our entity tool, and I want to do a prop static. And let's go ahead and open it up. World model, browse. And if you type in sky in the filter, you're going to see a bunch of models that have SkyBox in their name. These are special models that were made for a 3D SkyBox. That's what they were made for. So if we flip through here, and you can find one. Here's one. Okay. All right. So I'm going to click OK. Apply. There it is. All right. Now you got to be careful with these models because they do have a viewing angle. So like this one, for example, you know, you don't want to be looking at it from this side. It's good from here, it's good from here, and it's okay from here, but you can't look at it from this side. So we're going to take that and we're going to rotate it around. Let's find it. And I'm going to flip it. Oop, wrong way. Here we go. Flip it like that. All right, and I'm going to make sure it's sitting on the ground. Remember, every single block is multiplied by 16. So if it's one block above the ground, that translates into 16 blocks above the ground. So we do want to be careful when we're placing these. All right, so I've got this building right here. So let's go ahead and recompile this and see what that building did. Let's reload my map. There it is. All right, and so it's now a giant building. Now, the thing about these is they're not meant for you to walk right up to. They are pretty low poly. The textures on them are kind of low res. They're meant to be seen from a distance. So you don't want to have it where your player can get up this close to it. These are meant to create the illusion of distance or you know, things away from the player. So there's a whole assortment of these buildings in here that we can place. And if we look through here, let's create another one. So take this guy. And let's look at some of these other ones. This one. All right, so this is like a whole apartment block. All right, it's a whole bunch of buildings. So again, watch your angles. Because if you look at this, it's invisible from the back side. It's a no draw on the back. So I'm going to take this and I'll just kind of move it around. Make sure it's on the ground. It is. And we'll take a look at this one. All right? Awesome. So I'm pretty happy with that. So now what you would want to do is you would have some real buildings in front of this. So in the foreground, closer to the player, you're going to have your actual models, buildings, things like that. These go behind all that, but they give it a really nice, good sense of depth, and we can add layers of buildings behind this. Now the player can't go back there. So if I were to take this and let's do something different. Let's take this one and let's see what other buildings we've got. Let's do this one. Okay. All right, so that one is a little short, but I think it might be in the ground. It is. All right, so I'm going to lift this one up. And since it's behind the other building, I don't even really have to be concerned with if it's touching the ground or not, because it's behind this building right here. So then I could take this exact same building and I could put another one here, maybe lower it a little bit, and I could take another one, maybe put it here, maybe lift it a little bit. Right, and again, I should get a nice, right? So now those buildings, I've got more buildings, behind buildings, behind buildings. So I can add more and more depths of scenery to this. I can continue to add more and more and more scenery. If you dig through the props, I believe there's some trees that we can use. We can also create our own custom ones, which we will do tomorrow. So for today, what I want you to do is I want you to completely surround the player with an assortment of different buildings. So I don't want you to use the exact same building over and over and over again. I want you to take these buildings, there's maybe 10 of them, and use an assortment of them in several different layers, like I've done here, where I've got different layers of these buildings. And they're not meant to be looked at from back here, so don't worry about what it looks like from here. All we care about is what it looks like from the player side. Okay? So I want you to completely encircle the player with just layer after layer of buildings. Okay? Like I've done here, 2 or 3 layers deep, all the way around, so that it looks like the player's in the middle of a great big city. Do not put anything in the center. Okay? Nothing goes in the center. Tomorrow we'll cover how to do textures so that you could make a road that goes off into the distance forever, how we can make our own buildings and our own scaled textures to fit into this SkyBox. All right? But for today, we're simply using these little sky props. If you find trees and stuff like that, by all means, use them. If you've got the Left 4 Dead assets, it has a lot of SkyBox props that are not in the Half-Life prop set. So if you happen to have the Left 4 Dead props installed, you're going to have a lot more options when it comes to buildings. Left 4 Dead has an entire city skyline. Okay? Now, when you do that, make sure that your SkyBox has everything inside of it. If you need to make this SkyBox bigger, you can. Okay? If you need to stretch these a little bit, you can. But you cannot change this middle square right here. So if you're going to mess around with the ground, you must ungroup this, and you can only play around with the edges away from the center. So I am free to grab this and move this out this way, okay? But you cannot, under any circumstances, change this middle square. If you make any changes to the middle square, it wrecks the way the SkyBox fits around your game level, and you will have to start the entire thing all over again. All right? That is your assignment for today.